said why they're not coming. But if it was a huge commercial success over here, the Tonga tour, and Tonga were going back with, their pockets lined with gold, one would imagine Samoa would be coming.
I think there's two reasons. One is that's exactly one of them, that we probably can't give them the financial guarantees that they can get if they stay at home. The other thing is the Pacific Championship that they've just played in was such a success. Why would you want to leave home? So
true, but if the international game has anything about it, they should be saying to Samoa, you are not playing in this competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
You were committed to going to England, and
our calendar said you were.
Yeah, and if you don't want to go to England, don't go to England, but you're not playing as part of this tournament.
Well, we've got 6 nations lined up. Tonga are coming back. There's no room for you.
Yeah, but I can't imagine a situation where that will happen.
Well, that's whether the IRL have any teeth or not. Which is why the formal announcement that Samoa weren't coming was made by Simon Johnson, who sits on the international board. You're going, right, don't you need to take that decision back to your international board?
Well, I just, it's always been a mystery to me. The IRL is similar to, I suppose, the RFL over here in that it's the IRL is really operated by either the nations, but really Super League and the NRL sort of dictate what happens, with the sort of tier 1 nations, tier 2 nations, and the structure of the competitions, and that's again all about money. I mean, we were told way back in 2013 World Cup that you were sacrificing a lot of match fees from a match official's point of view for the good of the international sport.
Did you have to go economy class to? You wouldn't have got economy class in 2013.
I was lucky enough in 2000. I went.
Did you have to fly the plane?
Well, I travelled down under in 2006 for the Tri-Nations, 2008 for the World Cup, and again in 2010 for the Four Nations. And on each occasion, it was business class, so I was very lucky. We then went in 2017. I went twice that year for a mid-season international and a World Cup at the end of that year, and we travelled economy. The occasion when I travelled mid-season in 2017, I think I've mentioned it before, I'd refereed a game the night before at Hull on the TV on the Thursday. On the flight the very next morning, I was boarding the same flight with the England players. All the England backroom staff were all going business class, and I was the only one person as an RFL employee travelling economy, which I didn't think was right.
Send you a champagne glass down?
No, they definitely didn't. But, to have somebody like the England physio or the England team manager or England doctor or whatever travelling business class stuck in my throat a little bit. But I got the opportunity nevertheless to travel out down under and referee, and that's some of the things I was talking about last week about those opportunities unfortunately don't exist anymore. I mean, there were days in gone by where I think Russell Smith and Richard Silverwood went down under and refereed Australia, New Zealand. I think we've even had referees go down and referee the Origin games from the UK, and those days seem to be almost gone, really. So when we talk about for the good of the international game, that's where it sticks in my throat a little bit, that the last World Cup, in my opinion, money was wasted. They spent far too much money on some things that they could have cut back on, and still players and officials and people involved would have had a good experience.
Let's hope we've got a guest coming up in the next few weeks who can tell us about the World Cup. It'd be good, that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I think we're live on YouTube now. I don't know what went wrong, but listen to the podcast.
If you thought that was just the two of us busking,
you wouldn't have known. You would not have known.
It was.
What did I say about international? Oh, yeah, that's it. Because obviously the big thing is about neutral referees. Why don't we have neutral referees? Blah 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 blah. But I'm sure, because obviously I go through all these old programs that I stick up. There was a Great Britain New Zealand test in the early 80s which had an English referee. So it's not a new phenomenon.
It's all part of putting in enough courses for. I mean, it's great to see Ghanaian referees are starting to come through.
Aaron Moore, I think, travelled. I think it was to Ghana last year.
Yeah, I think he did the MEA Championship.
Yeah, to referee over there, and whilst he would have been there, he was doing some educational courses for the Ghanaians, which is absolutely what the International Rugby League should be about. It's about teams like York travelled down under, didn't they? Travelled to Africa,
Uganda,
and it's initiatives like that. That's what the International Rugby League should be about, spreading the game.
France are going to Kenya. You'd hope that they take the ability to do some match official courses.
Yeah.
So.
Here's some comments from Twitter. Ian says, Rugby League is stagnating. I do believe the game here is in is now in the same position as 1982. Without the Lions and competitive Ashes series, we're only going to struggle. No easy answers, but IMG is a cul-de-sac. That's bloody French again. We have to beg the Aussies to revive the international game to piggyback the domestic game onto. Well, they've revived the international game
in the Southern Hemisphere.
But
Steve Mascot the other week was talking about, was it the RFL's fault in a way by neglecting the home nations and neglecting France by not supporting those nations to improve those nations to therefore give you a competition on your doorstep. I don't know if that's easier said than done because those South Sea islands have been playing rugby league for some time.
I think what we need to say, if you look at it from a historical perspective, is that in the 2000 World Cup we had a quarter-final between England and Ireland, and those two teams were very, very evenly matched, and it was predominantly Super League players in each team with a sprinkling of NRL players in the Ireland team. And at that point we could have made a decision. It's going back to, you were saying that was when Super League was probably at its peak. That World Cup didn't end up being, very nearly bankrupted the game. But that quarter-final had something in it and a level of interest where there were over 15,000 people there, where you could have said, if we can keep the essence of what the Irish have got and build on that, we can keep, we can start perhaps the idea of some form of regular international competition between a Wales that was strong, starting to get weak, but 95 they've been really strong in that World Cup, Ireland, France and England, and you could play that repeat game between an England and Ireland team of that strength, maybe in Dublin the following year. We could have then started to build something. So we're looking back 20 odd years saying, what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere? It's not like we didn't have the opportunity, and then you would have had meaning to the
does that come back to the fact that though they nearly bankrupted the sport in 2000 and actually there wasn't the resources there to pump into those nations? I don't know, we didn't have a World Cup for 8 years, did we?
The reason it nearly bankrupted though was because it was spread too thinly over too many venues. But what we had was a concept there that we could have looked at and said, with everything else that's going on, how do we regenerate our finances? What was the success? Well, the failure was we tried to play in too many places and it didn't work, and we went to Ireland in the midweek and played the Maori, and we started the World Cup, didn't we, in Ireland? The first game was in Ireland.
Willie Poaching missing a goal kick. Yeah.
We didn't plan the tournament well, but we had some elements within that tournament. 20 years on, we could have had something. Why, for example, and is Toby King and is Michael McAlorum picked for England when, if we were serious about developing Irish Rugby League, they'd already played for Ireland. Robbie Mulhern had already played for Ireland, but he's bought into the England team. So 23 years on from we had a concept that we could have developed, England as the prime nation is still taking the best players from those other nations. Well, do we get what we deserve then? It's happened the reverse in the Southern Hemisphere. Players like Jason Taumalolo have turned around to New Zealand and said, I want to play for the nation of my heritage, and that's strengthened those nations. We've gone the other way. We're still pulling those best players and making them play for England. So I think we have to take an element of responsibility for that.
It's our fault. Samoa aren't coming, says Phil. We can't afford to fly a couple of players business class, or James. So I'm guessing we don't have the money to tour the Southern Hemisphere. Is international footy dead over here? Well, I guess we should put a caveat in all these things by putting the word men's in front of this stuff, just in case, and then we'll talk about the other stuff later.
But I also think if the host nation is paying, then there's absolutely no question that Australia will pay for our guys to go out there business class in 2025. The problem we've got is this huge disparity between North and South, and that the more that the Pacific Championships and Pacific Bowl become lucrative, bearing in mind that $5 million Australian dollars of government money has gone on into that tournament to start it off, then we have to find ways of either going over there on a more regular basis or waiting for them to come over here. That we know that they are coming here in 2027.
We said that about Samoa last week. Next year.
But we'll get Christian Wolf on the phone. He'll tell us.
Can we hold on without that level of international competition over here? I do think we are building something internationally. It's where Where do we fit into all?
I think
of
that's
this?
what's even more frustrating, isn't it? That I said last week about the calendar, and this is the first. We're almost at the first.
It's the second run.
Yeah, we've had the first run because we've had this last few weeks, but it's fallen at that sort of second hurdle, and who knows who the opponents England will now face.
I mean, let's segue on to that now you brought it in, and then we'll come back to the comments in a moment. So what happens next autumn then? We'll be sat here in a year, no doubt, talking about whatever has happened, but what will happen? What can happen? There's World Cup qualifiers to fit in some ways, or are they...
Probably 25, I would think.
Right, so we've got a bit of leeway then. We could have...
Didn't we talk about, when Steve Masker was here the other week, about there being... Is it in the Pacific Bowl 2 or whatever that is, the plate or something, where a team sits out each week or something?
Well, they've got 6 nations that play and 7 that are eligible, and the 7th nation was supposed to come here.
Yeah.
So Tonga will go back, theoretically, to replace Samoa, who were coming here. Now, whether we can get Fiji to come here, whether we can get PNG to come here, whether there'd be a sufficient draw for the RFL to make money on them coming here, that'll be some of the debates and discussions that they're having at the moment. And I think, with the greatest respect to PNG, you would have to stage those games in 3 traditional northern towns and try and get your 10 to 12 to 15,000 fans. And would that be enough? The days of getting 70,000 at Wembley to play Australia over here at the moment have gone. I think we've got to try and rekindle that by things like, and I think we mentioned this on here before, getting a second state of origin game in London in 3 or 4 years' time. In the same way that the NFL have brought matches over to London and now Germany, they're getting not only huge crowds, but they're getting great media interest, they're getting loads of merchandise sales on the back of it. It's very lucrative. The
that would sell out. It's just whether would they come for a one-off game.
Well, the fixture list that they've just brought out in the NRL today has now split up Origin, so it's not in consecutive weeks. There is so that middle game is now a potential marketing tool. Now, you wouldn't bring it here every year, and they wouldn't come here every year, and there'd be no need for that. They need to go to Melbourne, and they need to go to Adelaide, and they need to go to Perth or wherever they decide strategic. They might take one game to PNG, who knows? But London should be part of the game strategy of using as many events as it can to rekindle interest in that international element, and it's then what you put on around it. Can England play again at the same time?
That would only come back. It would all come back to money again.
Well, I think that money's there.
They're not going to do it for the good of rugby league.
No,
in the UK,
but I think Vegas will show them that they have unconquered markets that they can move into relatively quickly because the seeds are already sown in those markets. If you were to announce now that in 2025 or 2027, State of Origin 2 was going to be at Wembley Stadium,
that would sell out.
Those 80,000 tickets would sell, and it's what you do around that.
Yeah.
So, and at the same, England are going to play France. That mid-season test is going to be on that weekend at the same time, maybe at Wimbledon or something. Yeah.
Well,
however we do it.
Well, how about this then? Because we're just throwing ideas out there, never going to happen. So we've got the State of Origin at Wembley, but then on the Sunday or whenever, at the London Stadium, we've got England versus someone, because then it's still in London. But then on the same park, you've got the copper box. You can have the wheelchair international. You can have the women's games.
I think we need to look at it outside of just who do England play, because people will get fed up of hearing about Vegas. But the thing about that is they're not going there because they think they're going to crack the American domestic market. They're going there because they think that they can make a huge amount of money, and not on 1 year, but over maybe 5 years. And they're already being linked to a very, very large betting partner, who, if they brought that on board, would then probably mean perhaps a streaming deal with Fox. And that streaming deal wouldn't be, we'll just show the first 2 games from Vegas, we'll show all the games in the NRL. And from that, you then say, right, well, how does the Super League capitalise on that? Well, if they're going back to Vegas, then, we've said this before, we'll play the World Club Challenge as part of that weekend of rugby league in America. And what are the spin-offs then? Maybe England playing Australia in America. It's halfway for both of them. So when do we fit that into the schedule? And it's not what we do tomorrow. It's how do we get a period of games over a 7, 8, 10 year calendar that starts to make money and has broadcasting appeal and commercial appeal, and how does Northern Hemisphere work into that? And you know, we're talking conceptual stuff at the moment, but that's the discussions I think we've got to start having.
The Rugby Football League must be having those conceptual discussions as well, because they said they're looking for opponents for England in 2024.
But it's hand to mouth, isn't it? It's hand to mouth because they're now firefighting to solve a problem that they didn't realise they had on their hands for next year.
Do we go without England playing next autumn?
Well, I think England will have two choices. They either do find somebody that can come over here, and it may well be on a similar scale to Tonga.
Yeah.
So we can forget all talks of 80,000 people in the National Stadium, or we have to go over there.
Well,
and if we go over there, then that means we're over there in 24, 25 and 26. And what does that do to the perception of the international game over here? You will be able to fill some of that gap with World Cup qualifiers. So you will have France, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, Italy maybe, Greece, Serbia perhaps, all looking at playing meaningful internationals. And you might even want to bring some of those internationals and play them over here, where there is a market.
They're not going to capture the public's imagination the same way.
They're not going to make money.
No.
In the short term. But if you're talking about an international calendar and it's a piece of a jigsaw that fits into a bigger picture. I mean, I can remember going and seeing, was it Lebanon play Ireland at Dewsbury in a World Cup qualifier?
Was it?
Greece played Serbia in London in a World Cup qualifier.
I refereed Scotland against Greece at Scholars in the last few years.
And they did get crowds, but because we didn't know when we were doing the next one or how
I counted the crowd at Scholars though for that game.
Yeah, but we got 8,000 at Workington when Scotland played in the we can do it.
No,
we can do it, provided we don't do it like tomorrow.
It can be done. Was it Norway-Belgium at Headingley before a Leeds game?
Yes.
Because we nearly did it on Radio Yorkshire when we did.
Finished 35-34. It was better than the Super League game that followed it, I think.
Did they name it the Pacific Cup to purposely exclude England, asked Adam. I think that's a conspiracy too far, I think. It's in the Pacific. The international game would benefit from England being involved in the tournament to represent the Northern Hemisphere.
But it's not about the Northern Hemisphere, it's about the Pacific.
They don't need us, do they?
It's about the fact that 45% of the players that play in the NRL are from the Pacific regions. And the other, there's, I think, two things there. One is it's a political decision, so that the Australian government see PNG in the Pacific as the bridge to China moving forward nearer to us. So that's outside the realms of sport, other than it's sport that is the soft diplomacy in all of this. But I think the other thing is that the NRL in particular want to secure the Pacific, its region and its players as being rugby league. So their imperative to do that isn't to give England meaningful games. But I can see why they would want to do it. That they could blow rugby union out of the equation if they get this right. And that is actually really important.
And I think they see that the benefit of the international game in the Pacific benefits the NRL.
100%.
David says Rugby League is on life support in the UK, whilst France has green shoots despite what's been thrown at it, and Oz, and by default Pacific region, goes from strength to strength. UK needs dynamic leadership, not accountants. Top Rugby League teams will be talking to top Rugby U teams one way or another. There was a blog on the Guardian website which I'm sure some people read, because you've got to read something, and if it's about rugby union you can at least laugh at it. And what the comments were about, rugby union is dying, like we are. But the comments were saying maybe we could entice some of the big clubs across, like Bradford Bulls, because they haven't paid any attention to the last 15 years or so. You've written about this. Something's going to happen eventually. Hopefully it's a long, long time away, because people in Leeds don't want to watch rugby union because they've had the chance to do so. But maybe there will be a hybrid one day. I don't know.
I don't think it'll be a hybrid, and I don't think it'll be rugby union. The piece that I wrote was basically saying, and it was a purely discussion piece, it wasn't in any way linked to prior knowledge of anything, but it was that rugby union was facing an existential crisis down to concussion. Economics is one thing, and both sports have got severe economic problems, and they'd be foolish not to be looking at long-term how they get out of that. But the biggest problem that I think rugby union have got is around the issue of concussion and litigation surrounding concussion, and the fact that it would appear to me as an outsider but reading some of the papers that have been written about concussion and rugby union and its incidents in it, and if you remember their knee-jerk reaction to saying we're suddenly going to have tackles around the midriff, and then they had to go back on that a week. They have got too many players on the pitch. The one thing that full-time professionalism has done in both sports, as we talked about earlier, was it's made athletes. And the thing about athletes is that space then becomes a premium. Collisions then become more impactful if you've got more people on the field, because you're not playing space, you're playing bodies. So if they had to drop to 13 players aside, suddenly the game that we're playing is rugby league. Now, if you want to throw a modification there that you come up with one rule that has a line out, so you're not excluding half of the people that currently play it, then that's something for legislators to talk about. But the piece that I wrote basically said it's not hybrid, it's not rugby union, it's global rugby league. Now, you might have to change the name of it, but I don't mind watching rugby league. And I think, again, if you're talking about making a piece of a jigsaw, you look at this country, geographical, how that happens, who gives ground. But yeah, then
does the Northern Hemisphere have different rules to the Southern Hemisphere?
No, but then you're talking about a Super League, if that's what you want to call it, where it's Leeds Rhinos playing Leicester rather than Leicester bringing in Bradford Bulls to play 15 aside.
Bring back Wigan versus Bath. Says Phil.
Waste of time. Because it proved that we were very good at rugby league and they were better than us at rugby union. That Wigan Sevens was a more interesting.
But it did give us rugby union's greatest ever try, scored by friend of the programme, Craig Murdoch. So that's always positive.
But
much better than Gareth.
Two of our teams winning the Wigan Sevens, winning the Twickenham Sevens.
Yeah.
One of whom was absolutely blind, stinking drunk when they got there because they played a Super League game the night before and got drunk on the bus going down. Was the greatest advert for rugby league, not the Bath Wigan game.
War of the Roses, says Teddy. Men, women, wheelchair. This is an obvious answer. Martin Coy's watching. How do we work out a War of the Roses wheelchair game? I don't know. Where did London fit in that? Are they Lancashire again?
It's an outdated concept. Well, you've got to ask why things finished.
We brought back Yorkshire versus Lancashire. That didn't last too many years, did it?
But then last week I said we could bring it in for the women's game because we do need that gap. But in the men's game, where we say they play too many games, if we're replacing England with a War of the Roses series in the autumn, how many club coaches are going to find niggly injuries for their... How many groin strains are we going to find?
The main thing about War of the Roses is the fans stopped going. If there was any economic value and benefit in it, we'd still be playing it. It is not Origin. We might need to find another concept around an Origin. Something. But then you've got to accept that we play less domestic games to fit it in the calendar.
If we copied everything Australia do, we'd get rid of the Challenge Cup. People don't want to get rid of the Challenge Cup.
No, we shouldn't get rid of the Challenge Cup.
Can't wait for the 1895 Cup starting in January. We've got to talk about that as well.
Will Batley and Dewsbury play each other Boxing Day and then again in their group stage?
Yeah, quite probably.
At least the 1895.
At least they don't have to play the Summer Bash though this time. So that's a positive.
And if we didn't have enough loop fixtures, we now got loop fixtures in League One.
Robbie's asked us if there's any news on revamping the Challenge Cup. Not as far as we know. I mean, there was when was the IMG thing? Oh, it was at the Super League launch, wasn't it? That the season launch months ago, and there were ideas floated around, but nothing was ever agreed on.
The fact that they've now moved the Challenge Cup back, the fact that the Super League fixtures are due out, I think within the next week to 10 days, the fact that the Championship and League One were too far down the line to change anything, the fact that they wanted to drop Magic Weekend and loop fixtures, and 2024 I think will be the same. The Challenge Cup, you can't bring group fixtures in. It's
so
too
then
late.
You go back to IMG's plan. IMG's plan was to get rid of Magic Weekend. It was to get rid of loop fixtures. It was to revamp the Challenge Cup. Now those are three things that are not happening.
No.
Why are they not happening?
But
clubs
comes back to the clubs.
The really interesting thing is illustrative gradings, because I think that does take us along a road where we are moving to be the sport that we are rather than the sport that perhaps we might think we are, and there is no great opposition. There are some clubs who have come out and said they're not happy with certain bits of it, or they think their mark should be slightly higher. But I don't. I thought we'd see a groundswell whereby you'd have a certain amount of clubs saying, yes, we have to do it, and they're the ones that benefit from it, and a large majority of other clubs saying, don't really like this. Virtually every club that I've seen, even Barrow, who put out a fantastic statement saying, we voted against the principles, but we see where this is going and we want to support it. I think it's taken them a lot longer than they planned to get to where they are. That's really significant. That's a really significant building block, I think.
Maybe the Rugby Football League could take a leaf out of the government's book and bring back Ralph Rimmer and Nigel Wood. I don't know.
It's like bringing back Malcolm Cliff to coach Leeds. One for the teenagers.
Yeah, that went over my head.
1985.
Yeah,
I
was two.
You weren't even born. Came from Australia. I think coached Leeds for 6 games and wasn't re-engaged for the following season.
That was like Matt Parrish when he was at Salford.
Exactly what I was going to say. Thank you.
I remember Matt Parrish ringing Stuart Cummins up and sort of complaining about the referee and asking why he hadn't gone to the video referee. And Stuart said, well, the game wasn't on TV, Matt. There was no video referee, so that's why there was an in-goal official running up and down behind the post. Oh, okay, right, thanks.
Those two fellas, them ones. Anthony Broxton's written a book.
He has.
He's asked us some questions.
Very good book.
Questions for the panel, it says. We are a panel now. 1. Can we ever gain any national cut-through without playing Australia? People watch the games against Tonga. They watch the Wales game. They watch the wheelchair game. So do people watch anything in the same way they did 30 years ago? This is the difficult question, isn't it? Because the answer to that is, of course, no.
I think part of the problem is, how do you get coverage these days?
Well, this was the next question.
We just had the World Cup last year, which every single game was on the BBC.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, we got the coverage. Did we get the cut through? Probably not. But I'm a sceptic when people sort of say, oh, if we win the World Cup, then it's going to be the answer to all our problems, whether that's rugby league or rugby union or whatever sport that may be. For me, it never is.
I also think
incremental
Anthony will be the first to acknowledge that the media is completely different these days, and that when we got 70,000 people, when we were playing Australia in a World Cup final at Wembley Stadium, the broadsheet newspapers were there in abundance. The Martin Offiah posters had relevance and brought more people to the game.
There's probably 3-4 channels on TV,
and that the landscape of the media is, the Tonga games did not feature in the broadsheets.
Does traditional newspaper media still matter, and why aren't the sports editors interested in covering club games? I mean, we are coming off a week where a lot of people are being made redundant from one media group, and reading, and I'm sure this is the case for others, but the whole Daily Mail are losing their Hull FC and Hull KR reporters, or correspondents, whatever you want to call them. So
they've certainly been put on notice.
The world is changing, and the problem for newspapers is people don't want to pay for content anymore. How do you run a magazine, Phil? How does that work?
Sheer bloody madness. I think the other thing about that is that it's a self-perpetuating thing as well, that newspaper editors will say nobody's interested in rugby league, so we won't have rugby league, and then you don't have rugby league, and then the people that love rugby league don't buy the newspapers, and then the newspapers say that's because nobody it's where you begin and end and break that circle. But it has changed. It's why we need to find different ways, and I do think there has been a change of emphasis among a lot of clubs in their digital offerings. There was a survey out by Ernst Young, which you'll be able to read about in the new issue of On Sale Friday, talking about the most participated in sports and who watches those sports. And rugby league is the 9th most participated in sport. Rugby union is the 4th most. But in terms of Generation Z, which I think is people from the age of 18 to 24, so that's the new audience that are going to have money to spend and watching sport, none of them interested in rugby union. I think we were 18th, but we had a certain level of appeal. And that's what you've got to capitalise on, because that is now how you measure the analytics, the metrics, the spend power, the commercial companies that are going to invest in sport will be looking at surveys like that rather than how much column inches you've got in the Daily Telegraph. So yes, it's changed enormously, and why you can't really compare the two.
Teddy says, and this goes into Anthony's third point, which we'll come back to in a moment, clubs have to produce their own content, better content, more content. The problem with that is, speaking from someone who was vaguely at the coalface for a very short period of time, you need creative people to do that. You need resource to do that. When I worked at a Super League club, I was taking my laptop in to do editing and stuff on. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. But you need people who have the creative brain, who can fire out ideas, which I don't have them.
But what I would say is that's one of the areas that grading is, again, really helpful, because what it's saying is 25% of the points. 20% of the points are on field. So a fifth of what you do is on field, and that's important. And you look at the clubs that have been designated Grade A, and you would think that even though these are illustrative gradings, all of those 7 clubs are still going to be Grade A at the end of next season. So something dramatic would have happened if we haven't got 7 grade. All of those 7 clubs have made significant on-field signings. So it's not that they're saying, because we know we're going to be in Super League, we'll only put £2.50 in the players' budget. They know that people have still got to turn up. A lot of the other metrics relate to usage of the stadium, all that kind of thing, commercial funding. But one of the things it also highlights is the need to be out there appealing to a new audience. So clubs are going to have to devote more resource to that. Wakefield, your man, Matt Ellis, it's already,
he's everywhere.
He's built a business on the digital selling of kitchens. He doesn't have retail showrooms. All of his family fortune is based upon they've built a business that has been sold in a digital age, and he's going to put some of that resource into Wakefield. Clubs are going to have to do it, and that's a great thing.
I liked York's content from their kit launch on Saturday. I liked Warrington's video, which was not aimed at me whatsoever, but there's basketball on there, there's skateboards. I don't know if this is what the young people like, but I assume it is because they've done a video with it on. Doesn't matter if the kit is terrible or what, it doesn't matter, because they've got a slick video that looks good, and that's part of this, isn't it? As long as it looks good. If you are doing stuff on a budget, then it is difficult to make things look good.
But I think IMG have done a lot of work behind the scenes on this the digital image of the sport, and they've worked with every club, and they've given tips and hints as to how the content that they can put out is more relevant. And yes, I'm with you. I think it's really disappointing that some of the structural changes they wanted to get in, they haven't yet. But I do think some of the stuff they've been doing behind the scenes and how it's going to be measured and what it means going forward to the sustainability of clubs is starting to have an impact.
I think that was one of the frustrations when I worked for the RFL, that the members of staff at the RFL always felt that you were an easy target at the RFL, and they are an easy target, but what they're not probably good at is telling people what they do. So why aren't IMG telling people what they're doing with clubs and the work that they're doing with clubs on things like that, to try and improve things, to try and win over the fans from that point of view. I've seen clubs putting out a lot more stuff on social media and getting YouTube channels and stuff like that. I think that's been more than just sticking games on from this season though.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they've got a plan.
Don't forget to unsubscribe from all your rival clubs' YouTubes as well. You don't want them getting any IMG points. Don't be doing that. Straight away, don't subscribe to anyone now. Should the clubs spend to promote individual... Straight away, Anthony, you're saying, should clubs spend? I mean, there you go, there's a question. To promote individual stars as they did in the 80s and 90s. Who are the stars? Who do we promote? Because we've got, I've mentioned it before, the Super League have got a podcast, but occasionally, it's people who are not players on there, who are not playing.
Always has to be player focused. Or referee focused, clearly.
They're the stars.
TikTok,
not people retired.
TikTok and... I think programs like what's his name, Castleford, that went on. Love Island,
Shaq O'Neill,
things like that. That's the kind of thing these days.
We are high court judges. That Instagram.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, but I'm not on TikTok, and I don't watch Love Island. Believe it or not, that's probably comes as a shock to most people. But
the shock is you haven't been asked to be on it.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that will cut through. Being on I'm a Celebrity, that will cut through, won't it? And it's trying to get people on those channels, big in those channels.
And we also have to take the shackles off the players. So whereas media managers will want nothing too controversial to be said, and we need to be able to say to Catalan media want to make something out of Tom Johnson. He's had a great international series. His redemption story of leaving Wakefield thinking his career was in tatters, going to the south of France, being reinvigorated by the atmosphere around there 5 years after he last played for him. That's a great story, but what we don't want him to do is just say the things that we expect him to say. We need to build him up as a personality. I don't think you need to pay for that. I just think the game needs to say we've got some personalities. Sam Tompkins will be really interesting now he's retired. Will he become effectively the face and the voice of the sport? And would that be a bad thing if he did? I think he'd be brilliant.
Well, this guy wanted him to be years ago, didn't they? They started promoting that. Here's a terrible idea someone can steal. Rugby league players, they're all full of tattoos, aren't they? I mean, some of them are dreadful. Well, let's have a series where they explain what these tattoos mean. Why have they got them? That might appeal to someone. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there.
I don't think
I'm
they're
not a
the only
content
school.
creator. No. But yeah. What needs changing? Mark asked rhetorically, because I asked it. Maybe our expectations. Perhaps it's okay to be a big, small sport in the places that like it already, or at least not confuse being exactly that with being a dying sport. We're not dying, are we?
No, I think that goes back to we've lost our identity because we knew what we were and where we were located and who in terms of industry and infrastructure we were linked to, and through no fault of our own as a sport, they've been broken. You know, there aren't as many schools, there aren't working men's clubs, there aren't pubs that always used to have sides. You know, it has changed. We have to decide how relevant we are in the modern social environment and the fabric and the networks that we still do great work in community, but does that mean that it's going to be an elite Super League area? So we have to have those honest discussions, and we shy away from them too often about what we need to be and what would make it. If we are a small, if we're a big minority sport, then we can't expect to get money out of Sky. We can't expect to get coverage in newspapers. We can't expect to be anything other than maybe a part-time sport. We can survive, but then we'll never beat Australia. We'll never be included in a series whereby we're going to win a World Cup. We might get to a quarter-final at best. And if we accept that though we want those to be our limitations, then that's fine. But I think we can, I've always thought, we can be bigger and better and more dominant than that. And I think, unfortunately, because sport is now business, whether we like it or not, we have to make some business decisions rather than it's great being strong in the areas where traditionally we have been. But if we're brutally honest and scratch below the surface, less people are playing in those areas than have ever played before.
And if you've got to find a pot of money, then you can't just continue spreading it thinly. Yeah. You have to cut your cloth.
But you also have to have a strategy of how you expand your business with a smaller pot of money.
Business segue. Phil, do you know of any spare stadiums? Asking for my fellow Salford fans. This was one of the other stories from last week, and I guess this comes into the future of everything. And we'll go back to more of your answers on those questions in a moment. What do we do with Salford? Because I'm not sure what... This is the problem with... And it's the example I use time and time again. If Derek Bowman had been from Hunslet, they'd now be in Lee's position. As we've seen with Salford in the past, false messiahs don't always work out, despite what people may want you to believe. And perhaps some of their issues now, I'm not saying all of them were caused by that person, but I think when you don't necessarily keep up agreements with the people who own your stadium, that might be a problem in the future.
I think it goes back further than Mao and Kukash. It goes back to the decision to leave the Willows, a ground that they owned, as far as I'm aware. And they ultimately do not own a ground. They are tenants in that stadium, and it's a ground that was built through a joint venture between the council, local council, and Peel Holdings. And they set up a stadium company, and that stadium company operates the stadium, and they are just one of a number of tenants in that stadium, alongside Sale, alongside a private gym, alongside Swinton that use it as a training base. Lots of other things. They've made an office out of a stadium, underneath the stadium. I think I was reading a council report yesterday. And unfortunately, that's what happens. I mean, Wigan have seen that themselves, haven't they? You know, they had Central Park, they sold that, and they became tenants effectively in a football stadium, and Hull had the same issues at their stadium.
Huddersfield.
They don't own it. Huddersfield the same. So I think it's it's a longer term decision, or the ramification of a longer term decision. I think it's perhaps a little bit unfair on Salford City Council. They're being criticised. Unfortunately, whether you like it or not, having worked at a local authority, having worked at Leeds City Council, decision making does not happen quickly, and councils are strapped for cash, and they have to be spending their money wisely in accordance with the public purse and
public interest. So
public
if you've got 5,000 fans that are passionate about Salford, there might be 10,000 fans that like flower arranging. As a council, you've got to balance. Whatever. We're passionate about rugby league. We think it should be treated as a priority. But a council has to look at care services or waste disposal or yeah.
I mean, you've got some local authorities at the moment that are serving notices to say they're effectively gone bankrupt. As we've seen with Birmingham City Council, the local authorities are strapped for cash. So it's unreasonable to assume that a local authority is going to continue pumping money into a stadium company that, as far as I understand, that company it's owed £34 million. Peel and Salford City Council have pumped in £34 million in loans to the stadium company. So the stadium company is not making money. So are Salford paying enough rent? Probably not. There's probably other sources of income that can supplement that. And I get that it's part of a wider regeneration area around that stadium, and there's land there that could be sold to repay those debts. And those are some of the reasons why that money is being loaned into that stadium company, that the council will get that money back in the long term. But there's obviously political issues going on there as well, because I believe the Conservatives are opposing some of what's being planned. As ever, it's never straightforward, is it? It's not somebody's picking on Rugby League or picking on Salford as a club.
I think the other thing is you can look at comparable clubs in Rugby League, and then you can look at Salford's individual case. So Barrow have put out an appeal saying we're doing everything we can do on field. We are as close and linked to our community as we've been for a very long time, but we haven't got a stadium. So rather than go to the local council, they're now going to British Aerospace and saying you're regenerating the town. It looks like we're going to be, quite a wealthy.
But there is government money out there.
Yeah.
I mean, Keighley have tapped into the Towns Fund that Keighley benefited from. Wakefield, they've given £2 million to each of the three Wakefield clubs. There is government money out there.
But I also think that Salford are going through what Bradford are going through at the moment. That a development company owns Odsal, and until there is a way of resolving the issue of how best that works for everybody, then Bradford won't. Probably that one missing key to get into Super League will be where they play.
Bradford's situation is slightly different. The freehold is owned by the council.
Yeah, well, it's a development company, isn't it?
No, it's owned by the council freehold, that's subject to a long lease to the RFL. So the RFL have the long lease from the council,
which is up for sale.
But again, Bradford are only at one tenant in a stadium that's run by the RFL, which was a complete conflict of interest when they acquired it. And now just happens to be Bradford Bulls just happen to be run by the former CEO of the RFL. So it's in Bradford. It's in Bradford Bulls' interest, in my opinion, to acquire the leasehold interest in that stadium. They would then, if they can't do that, the council then should acquire the lease from the RFL, and then the council have full control of that stadium.
75.
But again, why would the council?
750k.
Why would the council? They wouldn't probably have to spend that much money to acquire the long leasehold interest from the RFL, but then they acquire all the maintenance responsibilities and liabilities that come with running that stadium. And as most people will probably know, that's a huge sum of money. Dare I say, some of these organisations need development advice, and that's what I do for a living.
Would you know anyone?
Yeah. Welcome to our new offshoot podcast.
The other thing I would say about Salford is it's about investment in the club. So whilst people like Paul King have mortgaged their house and can't do any more, what they need is outside investors, and I would equate that with what Hull KR did. Neil Hudgill did a fantastic job to keep Hull KR going, but what they got were more investors coming in to help him, bought the lease back of the ground. They now own Craven Park. They own the land around Craven Park. It's got an asset value.
Absolutely.
And they also have the ability to put on things like Craven Street. The club is moving forward off the field, matching on the field. But it's only external finance that has come in and done it. What Salford need are people who can come in and help fund the club and take them to a different venue, and whether extricate them from the lease there and say, well, maybe there is another venue within the Salford catchment area that we can either develop or buy land around or become a part of, but be a partner in it rather than merely a tenant in it. And it's not what Salford can do, it's whether Salford can get investors to help them do it.
And Phil mentions here, over the past 10 years, we've only averaged 3,783 fans. Nice round number for you. And this is...
Yeah, the numbers are in the report, comparing sale, well not comparing, but they do state the total number of spectators that have gone through the turnstile in the 12 months, and it's way below what sale achieved.
How many times did Michael Carter say Wakefield could spend the full salary cap if they had 6,000 people coming through the turnstiles? And they never got an average of 6,000 people coming through the turnstiles, hence they didn't spend the salary cap and ergo got relegated. How do you find... Maybe people aren't interested, I don't know.
The thing that I do think about illustrative grading is that all of these issues that have been... We've known that they've been there, but they've never affected the ability of somebody to go out like a Dr. Kukash to try and build a team solely and not address the other issues underneath, so that the foundations tend then to be built on sand. The governing body has been able to say, well, we're not micromanaging clubs. Now we're saying those are the criteria by which you will be judged. And if you don't hit enough of those, and that includes your stadium and your who finances your club, you won't be in Super League.
Who do we blame for Dr. Kukash getting involved at Salford? Gavin says, I am an outsider, bracket Scottish. You're not an outsider, Gavin. Welcome.
Welcome.
The talk of Ireland and so forth is irrelevant. Ireland and Scotland do not really meet criteria. You're only rebadging England players for an English audience. Well, I mean, sell some more shirts.
Yeah, but the same.
Don't the Scotland Rugby Union team, aren't they full of South Africans at the moment? Isn't that just the nature of international sport? Heritage is absolutely vital.
We've seen that in the Rugby Union World Cup recently, though. Yeah. I can't remember what the stats were about certain teams and whether they were born in that country or not. These days, it's almost irrelevant.
We interviewed Luke Keary, didn't we, when he came over for the World Cup to play for Ireland, and he was talking about the ability to go over there and find the roots, the ancestral roots of his family. And I don't think anybody was prouder to pull on an Ireland shirt than he was. Now, Luke Keary is not going to be picked for Australia in the foreseeable future, though he's had a great season with the Roosters. I think if we had a meaningful international calendar, and that included Ireland playing England in Dublin or Belfast, I think we would find a way to get the Luke Kearys over here to I think it probably cost him money to play in that World Cup, but he wanted to.
And when Scotland played as part of the Four Nations in, I've forgotten which year it was now.
The one where we went to Coventry.
2016?
Possibly, yeah. We went up to Workington and they draw with New Zealand.
And it was too wet.
Yeah, I was on the line.
Because it never rains in New Zealand.
God, it was freezing. But they made that Workington sort of their home, didn't they? And they were successful in that tournament. Yeah. So it can happen. But there had a number of Australians playing in there.
Richie Myler was passionate about playing for Ireland, and you would have thought when you sat down and looked at eligibility that it was tenuous. It wasn't. It really meant something to him. And if he is still towards the top of his game. I know he's just signed to play in the Championship, and Ireland had played an international this autumn, and he could have played in that, in the knowledge that the players that were around him were of a standard to at least put up a competitive game against England. We can't keep throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And it's not about England stockpiling. If England can't find another centre than Toby King because he's playing for Ireland, then there's something wrong in England. But we could have found another centre.
We've done well because we've done an hour. We still haven't solved anything yet, so that's good. But I don't think we're ever going to find any answers.
We failed the exam.
Eric says, how about a Ryder Cup style Northern Hemisphere versus Southern Hemisphere? Well, golf? Have a golf tournament? I mean, you could do anything.
Played in the Algarve.
Coming soon to old pictures from programmes, Andrew Ettinghausen in some kind of sprint competition. Bring back sprint competitions and goal kicking. I want to see Tara Jane Stanley versus whoever.
Rhys Martin.
I want to see that. Is he still the most capped Papua New Guinean? Or
he is in Papua New Guinea, but I'm not sure the International Record Keepers Club have recognised that.
I don't know. I don't know what we do next autumn, but we're going to have to do something. But if we don't have the men, do we put the focus on the women and the wheelchair teams? Because we can have a 3-match series against France in both if we wanted, or the tri-series between England, France and Wales in whatever. And
it's not going to make enough money for the RFL, unfortunately. And that is what it's about.
Yeah,
Goes right back
all
to the
it's
very
about.
first point that we made when we started. It is a sport that has never quite had enough money to do what it wants. As you rightly pointed out, there was a period of time when it had enough money, but it didn't know what it wanted to do with it. And within a short space of time, compared to the 130 odd years it's been in existence, it wasted that money.
Yeah.
Didn't build any legacy on the back of it.
what are we doing with League One? That's a question we've asked in the last
Well, the
10 years of this
The
programme.
good story about that is Newcastle are back.
Yes, I agree. It is a good story. It is. It's just.
But Cornwall are not in the 1895 Cup because no one wants to go to Cornwall.
Again,
Allegedly.
that tells you more about who we are and why we've never quite achieved our potential than anything else. Cornwall are a member of the RFL. They are entitled to play in that competition. They want to play in that competition. They've been asked not to play in that competition because other clubs don't want to travel there. Well, we're always going to be what we are then, aren't we? But somebody needed to say, I'm sorry, they're in it.
Race to the bottom. And we still have, obviously,
Which makes it feel like this has to be a stopgap for next year for 24, and there has to be a bigger restructure for 25. And it's almost, look, let's just get through 24 to get to 25. But I'm still not quite sure what 25 looks like.
But we had the idea that League One was going to include clubs like Hemel Hempstead and Gloucester and Oxford, but we didn't, Coventry and London Scholars, we didn't come up with how we were going to achieve that and what the levels were going to be that they were going to play at, where their players were going to come from, whether there was going to be promotion, relegation, was going to be League One North and League One South, and would there be equal competition. That was a debate we could have had in about 2015, 2016. We brought clubs in with no strategy or plan as to how that would pan out. So we end up with isolated pins in maps rather than a development or the development and expansion strategy that we need is possible, but not the way that we do it. So we go, Cornwall, you can't be in it. Toulouse, you can't be in
How many
the Challenge Cup.
It's like England played New Zealand in blooming. There was it Denver. I mean, when you think of it now, it's just off the scale in terms of.
But
then you try and explain to people why we had Toronto in a competition.
But it was a one-off game, wasn't it? What was the plan to play in Denver?
Money. It all comes back to money. That somebody supposedly was putting up money to hold a fixture. But
But you can't have
the
one
plan?
fixture in the way that you can't. Toronto, in many respects, ticks so many boxes. If there'd been illustrative grading for Toronto, they wouldn't have been far off a grade A with everything that they were doing.
I agree.
But they were never going to work with one club in a continent.
How many points you get knocked off?
What was the plan?
And it's built on sand, isn't it? Because if that person then pulls out,
But it's like Toulouse and Toronto have to pay all the expenses for everybody that plays them. When did that become an equitable system? When it's not only that we're not going to give them dispensation, we're actually going to penalise them for being in our competition.
we don't have them in the competition in the first place.
Or have them in with the point of saying they come in at this point and in 5 years' time, this is what we look like, and that's why they're in, and this is what they bring to it. And by then, maybe we'll have Ottawa as well, and we might have New York, and
we've got Ottawa. They're just playing Cornwall.
Yeah, well, it's Hemel.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? It's always like it's hand to mouth. It's not a strategy.
And again, the sport chops and changes, doesn't it? It sort of introduces the exiles. So people have been talking about exiles this week again, but. We've been there, done it,
It doesn't work.
And it doesn't work. We've done Yorkshire and Lancashire, and that's been brought back. That doesn't work. So we chop and change things all the time. How many different formats of the World Cup have we had? And we're changing yet again. We've had 3 World Cups that were supposedly successful, and now we're going back to single World Cups. And they're saying in their press release that that's successful because they've got so many expressions of interest.
22.
That, to me, doesn't necessarily demonstrate that that's success. Because I could put an expression of interest that I could play in my back garden.
On this pitch.
That would count.
Yeah.
And the thing about that as well is that at some point you've got to decide where you want to be rather than just get expression. Because if there are, for example, expressions of interest in Middle Eastern regions, but there is no domestic rugby league underpinning it. Why would you take it then?
Money, which is why and it's a broken record, isn't it? But most sports are now heading to the Saudi, aren't they, because of money?
But you don't want to be putting your World Cup there with not a single person in the stadium and nobody playing the game when they've gone. You also have to take a balance about, is it better to be location A where we don't get as much money but we get a benefit for the sport, or location B where we fill our bank account but get nothing on the back of it.
Do West Wales still have a membership of the Rugby Football League? And if so, can we buy it? Can we buy it? Can we buy a share? Can we have a vote?
And then put in an expression of interest to host the World Cup.
We're going to host the game. We're going to move the West Wales to Selby. Have the Selby Stallions. I don't know what we're going to call the women's team yet.
We'd take them to Pyongyang, wouldn't we?
Well, but
and then you could put an expression of interest for the World Cup.
Like Selby team.
North Korea stage Rugby League World Cup.
Phil says it feels like we've been having this conversation for 20 years or more. Must be more than 20 years. Phil.
More. It's since
It's been just over an hour, hasn't it? It feels like 20 years.
We've been having this conversation since 1895. Yeah. And you look at some of the clubs that even came into the Northern Union, and we still haven't had South Shields were in the Northern. Wales had 5 clubs. Plymouth were in the Northern Union. Coventry. It's not that we haven't done it. We just haven't done it very well.
Kenton Victor. Chris says up the trin, up the pies as well. Come on, Wigan. Send us all your best players. Are the RFL eligible to play the Euro Millions? A fundamental issue with Rugby League is no one knows about it. Expansion isn't a panacea to suddenly fixing the sport. Promote it. That's big words there. West Pyongyang Raiders, says Teddy. Yeah, good.
The thing that we've said before is that if you are, your sport was a forest when it first was established, and you've had dry rot in some of those trees, and you need to plant new roots in a field next door, you have to do it, because otherwise your whole forest will be infected.
Not like replacing Wakefield with Featherstone if they'd have won the championship.
I was intrigued where you were going there, because the whole of the UK was covered in trees at one point, and I think I was reading today on BBC News that is it in Kenya where everybody's having a public holiday to plant trees. So maybe that's what we need to do. We need to plant rugby league clubs.
Where do you plant?
We need a public holiday to plant rugby league clubs.
One thing we've said is that there hasn't been enough money. There hasn't been enough time either. Not in terms of the amount of time that rugby league has been in existence, but the amount of time to generate interest in areas, or we move too quickly. We had a World Cup in 2013 in Bristol. We got 8,000 people. Everyone said, "This is brilliant." It's on a Wednesday night, it's raining, it's the worst 2 ranked teams in the tournament. Loads of people turned up. Don't care how many tickets were given away. It was a great event. What did we do on the back of it?
It's the same, I agree. It's another Denver, it's another Middlesbrough. Take a game to Middlesbrough. When's the next game in Middlesbrough that you've targeted? And we talk about hosting these games in these 3 venues that we've just had. Why didn't we have towns and cities bidding again to host those 3 games, or a game out of the series? I mean, that's what should be happening next year. We shouldn't just be taking it to Wigan and taking it to Hull and then somewhere else. Whenever you make a decision, it has to be strategic.
Steve just put his set of 6 out, which is interesting, so I'll have to read that later, because I can't read it and do a podcast at the same time. Ian Bolters compared you to Eric Cantona with your philosophical trees thing.
Okay. Well, I'll take that as a compliment.
Don't go kung fu kicking anyone in the stands.
Thank you, Ian. And for your contribution to our magazine, which is excellent in this current one.
The new one? The new one. Coming out.
I say current because it went to print last night, so to me it's current.
I've been peppering Phil with images of Harris this weekend, haven't I? So,
you have?
So we just had a potty training with Harris, and Forty20 magazine. Yeah, Forty20 magazine has come in perfect for that. He enjoys reading Forty20 on the
attention. Potty. Well, I read mine on mine. No.
The future, the new demographic. Speaking of young people, Abigail, of course, who long-time listener of the programme. I think the programme's been going longer than she's been alive, but still. Ikram Butt was at their presentation this week.
Was that Limehouse
Lions, yeah.
I met Abigail at the book signing for Kevin Sheffield and Rob Burrow last Saturday. What a lovely young lady she is.
Can someone have a word with him? Because he's doing another thing in his infield. He's doing another running thing. Why does he keep doing these things?
Just to make you feel inadequate.
Oh, no, it's terrible, isn't it? The BBC Breakfast run out of things now because Captain Tom's not around. They have to get Kevin Sinfield to do everything now. He's not building a spa, is he, somewhere? But Abigail says, what's good about Rugby League is it's fun and the best game to watch and play, and all the players are dead nice to their fans. I mean, some of them are.
You see, that we sometimes lose that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. But the players are usually so good with the fans, and the ability to get so close to them is not always possible in other sports.
What needs changing is more money to lower league clubs and get rid of fun police stewards. What a fun! I'm the fun police.
More money to lower league clubs.
Where do we get it from?
Yeah.
Where's the TV deal for the Championship and League One and the 1895 Cup? If someone from the RFL comes on this programme next week, which they might do, or they might not, I think, well, they haven't confirmed yet. They said they were going to confirm, and I don't like bugging them. I think we should ambush them and say, can we do the 1895 Cup draw on the programme? Because then they've got to give us an answer. Because, like, in the past...
Didn't we want to do a draw once and we weren't allowed?
Yeah, it was the League One Cup, as was.
Right.
Might have been, was it the iPro Cup? The one that they played at the Summer Bash? Yeah, it wasn't allowed to be on Radio Yorkshire, but it was allowed to be on Radio Leeds. But so I'm not that bitter or anything.
You've never held that against them?
No. I mean, I detuned my radio. Can't get Radio Leeds on my DAB radio. Can't get Heat Mallorca, though. I don't know how that's worked. Is there anything else? Have we discussed everything that's happened in the last week without any rugby league whatsoever? I did see a game of rugby league, but it was
Was it good?
13. It was all right. Burgers were cheap at Upton, so well done, Upton. Cheap burgers, well done. Much nicer than the ones at Wakefield last year. Look forward to watching the 1895 Cup, Wakefield versus not Cornwall, in the David Fafita Mega Grandstand. Looking forward to it.
You'll be playing Featherstone, won't you?
In the Dowell Powell Derby. And the Danny Kermond Derby. And everyone else who's come back.
Been some interesting...
signings.
No appointments on staff. You know, Francis Cummins at Hull, Danny Ward at Hull KR, Danny Kermond at Wakefield. Interested.
It's good for Danny's. Danny Ward,
And
Danny Maguire, Danny
Maguire,
Kermond. Yeah. Where's all these Danny? Where's Danny Brough? On that bombshell. Is it?
We were never going to solve the world.
No.
But hopefully we've created some debating points.
Filled an hour and 50
I mean, one
minutes.
thing we haven't mentioned, which we've mentioned on many other podcasts before, is about the governance of the sport. I don't know whether the governance has ever been different to how it is, but you know, for me, you have to give an organisation more power as opposed to lots of organisations with elements of power.
I don't think there are too many boards that have 35 constituent parts in them that make decisions. And I know they don't have the same voting rights amongst them, but that's a lot of opinion to take on board if you're ever going to move forward. And we have now got a board of 6 for Rugby League Commercial. You would think that power would be ceded to them to make these kind of decisions, and representatives to that board would be from the various stratas of the game, rather than it be a decision-making process. How easy it is to change that? Maybe we could have somebody from the RFL who's involved in governance.
Fingers crossed. Wales are off to the USA, so give them all your money so they can go play there. Julie Boyd-Ward, our mate, she's in the squad. So
I hope they get the finance to go.
So that's good. They've got the what did they say on the press release? They've got the tickets and the visas and everything. So you know, just need some money,
on that, clearly, USA Wheelchair have pulled out of playing Australian Wheelaroos in Vegas, which is going to be part of this celebration. That should immediately be, if we can do it, a 3-match Ashes series between England and Australia in Vegas, with coaching of Americans so that they can spread. I did tell Martin that, so if he's watching, it won't have come as news to him.
Wales versus USA is part of
Craft Beer.
The Beers of America Craft Beer and Adaptive Sports Festival, in conjunction with Visit Myrtle Beach Tourism. So,
are you allowed to drink and wheel?
I thought you were going to say something else there.
Is it a stimulant? Is it on
I
the
don't think it's a
WADA
performance
ban
enhancer,
list? I don't think you've seen enough Leeds teams in the past, Phil, in the 80s.
Boxing Day. The smell of rum from the scrum.
And there was something else I was going to mention about. England France's in 2 weeks, isn't it? Now? It's getting closer. It's getting closer. So we're looking forward.
Waiting for the streaming details of that.
So there's some positivity. And to close things up, because Carsten, this is perfect. Rugby League needs a forward strategy and decent marketing. Maybe call it framing the future.
Never can.